He had a shovel in his hands and no reason left to live, until two tear-streaked faces appeared at the edge of his field, asking for help. What kind of pain makes a man want to vanish? And what kind of love can pull him back? In the middle of nowhere, New Mexico, the sun beats down mercilessly on a man who's already been beaten by life. Jedediah. Jed Mercer stands alone on a hill overlooking his ranch, sweat pouring down his weathered face as he drives a shovel into the dry, unforgiving earth. But this isn't just any hole he's digging. This is his grave, his own final resting place. Jed's hands, once steady enough to thread a needle or gentle a wild horse, now shake with exhaustion and grief. Every shovelful of dirt he throws aside feels like another piece of his soul being buried. The hole grows deeper, wider, more final with each passing hour. At his feet lies everything that's left of his former life. A half-empty flask of whiskey that burns away the memories. An old leather Bible his wife used to read from every Sunday. And a photograph so worn from handling that the faces are barely visible anymore. But Jed doesn't need to see the picture clearly. He's memorized every detail of his wife Sarah's smile and his boy Tommy's bright eyes. The fire took them both 6 months ago, started in the kitchen while Jed was out checking the back pasture. By the time he saw the smoke and rode hell-bent for home, the flames had already claimed everything that mattered. The house was rebuilt, but the family, well, some things can't be replaced with lumber and nails. Since that terrible day, Jed's been going through the motions of living without actually being alive. He feeds the cattle because they need feeding. He fixes fences because they need fixing. But inside, he's been dying inch by inch, day by day, until finally he decided to make it official. The grave is almost deep enough now. Come morning, he figures, this whole nightmare will be over. No more waking up to an empty house. No more hearing phantom voices calling his name. No more pretending that life without Sarah and Tommy is worth living. As the sun sets over Dry Creek Basin, painting the sky the color of blood and regret, Jed climbs out of the hole and heads back to the house. One last night, he tells himself. One last bottle of whiskey to numb the pain, and then peace. But as he stumbles across his property in the growing darkness, something catches his attention. Strange sounds coming from the direction of his storage shed, scratching, rustling, like animals looking for shelter. Probably coyotes, he thinks, too tired and drunk to care. Let them have whatever they want. By tomorrow, it won't be his problem anymore. What Jed doesn't know is that those sounds aren't coming from coyotes at all. They're coming from something far more dangerous to a man trying to die. Something that might just remind him why life is worth living. If you thought this story started dark, just wait until you see what pulled him back from the edge. Dawn breaks over Dry Creek Basin like a reluctant witness to another day of misery. Jed wakes up on his kitchen floor, still wearing yesterday's clothes, his mouth tasting like whiskey and defeat. For a moment, he's forgotten about his plans. Then he sees the shovel leaning against the wall, and reality crashes back down on him. But something's different this morning. Something that makes him pause before reaching for the bottle. Outside his kitchen window, near the old water pump, there are footprints in the dirt, small ones, barefoot, fresh enough that the morning dew hasn't had time to settle in them yet. Jed's instincts, dulled by months of grief and alcohol, suddenly sharpen. He's been a rancher for 20 years. He knows the difference between animal tracks and human ones. These belong to children. He grabs his rifle from beside the door, not out of malice, but out of caution. This far from town, unexpected visitors usually mean trouble. The tracks lead directly to his storage shed, the same place he heard those strange sounds last night. Jed follows the trail carefully, his boots making no sound on the hard-packed earth. The shed door is slightly ajar, something he would have noticed if he'd been sober. He can hear movement inside now, soft whispers and the shuffle of small feet trying to be quiet. With his rifle ready but not aimed, Jed slowly pushes the door open. What he sees stops him cold. Huddled in the corner of his shed, surrounded by old saddles and dusty feed sacks, are three of the most pitiful creatures he's ever laid eyes on. Two children, a girl maybe 10 years old and a boy who can't be more than 8, dirty, thin, and scared half to death. Between them, wrapped in what looks like an old coat, is a baby that can't be more than a few months old. The girl immediately shields the baby with her body, her eyes wide with terror but fierce with protection. The boy grabs a broken rake handle and raises it like a weapon, his small hands shaking, but his jaw set with determination. For a long moment, nobody moves. Nobody breathes. Jed stares at these three lost souls who've somehow found their way to his property, and they stare back at him like cornered animals, waiting to see if he's predator or protector. Finally, Jed slowly lowers his rifle and takes a step back. When he speaks, his voice is gentler than it's been in months, the voice he used to use with Tommy when the boy had nightmares. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he says quietly, "but you sure picked the wrong ghost to haunt. The children don't move, don't speak, don't trust." And honestly, Jed can't blame them. Looking at their hollow eyes and too-thin faces, he's starting to wonder if maybe they're exactly what he needed to see. An hour later, Jed finds himself doing something he hasn't done in months, cooking breakfast for more than just himself. The kids are still wary, huddled together in his kitchen like rabbits ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. But hunger, it seems, is stronger than fear. The girl keeps the baby close while the boy watches Jed's every move with suspicious eyes. Smart kid, Jed thinks. Trust is a luxury these children clearly can't afford. When he sets plates of eggs, bacon, and biscuits in front of them, they attack the food like wolves. No manners, no hesitation, just desperate, ravenous hunger that tells a story Jed doesn't want to imagine. How long have they been living rough? How far have they traveled? "Slow down," he says gently, refilling their glasses with milk. "Food ain't going anywhere." The girl looks up at him with startling blue eyes that have seen too much for someone so young. "Thank you, mister," she whispers, her voice hoarse like she hasn't used it in days. "Got a name?" Jed asks, settling into his chair with his own plate. She hesitates, glancing at the boy as if asking permission. Finally, she nods. "I'm Maisie. This here's my brother Tate. And the baby. The baby's Emma." Jed nods, not pushing for more information. Names are a start, but he can see in their eyes that there's a whole lot more they're not ready to share. The way Maisie's hand never leaves the knife at her belt, the way Tate positions himself between Jed and the others, these kids have been through hell. "Where you folks headed?" he asks, keeping his tone casual. Maisie's jaw tightens. "Away," she says simply. "Just away." Jed understands that feeling better than she knows. Running from something or towards something? "Both," Tate speaks for the first time, his voice barely above a whisper. "We ain't going back." The finality in the boy's voice hits Jed like a punch to the gut. He recognizes that tone, the sound of someone who's made peace with never having a home again. It's the same tone he's been using when talking about his own future. "Well," Jed says, surprising himself with the words, "you're welcome to stay here while you figure out where away is. Got plenty of room, and these old walls could use some life in them again." Maisie studies his face, looking for the trap, the angle, the price that always comes with kindness from strangers. "What do you want from us?" Jed considers the question seriously. What does he want? Yesterday, all he wanted was to join Sarah and Tommy in whatever comes after this life. Today, looking at these three lost souls, he's not so sure. "Honest answer," he says finally. "I've been running too, girl, just in a different direction. Maybe we can all stop running for a while." For the first time since they met, Maisie allows herself a small smile. It transforms her face completely, showing glimpses of the child she should be allowed to be. "Okay," she says, "for now." It's not much of a promise, but it's more hope than Jed's had in months. 3 days later, Jed finds himself doing something he never thought he'd do again, riding into town with a purpose other than buying whiskey. The children need supplies, proper clothes, shoes, medicine for the baby's cough, and food that will stick to their ribs. Dry Creek Basin isn't much of a town, just a general store, a saloon, a church, and a handful of houses scattered along a dusty main street. But it's the closest thing to civilization for 50 miles, and right now Jed needs what passes for civilization. The bell above the door jangles as he enters Murphy's general store. Behind the counter, old Pete Murphy looks up with the kind of surprised expression usually reserved for seeing ghosts. Well, I'll be damned, Pete says, setting down his inventory book. Jed Mercer, as I live and breathe. Ain't seen you in town since the funeral. Jed nods curtly and starts gathering items. Milk powder, bandages, 3 sets of children's clothes in approximate sizes. Pete watches with growing curiosity as the pile on the counter grows. You're adopting, Jed? Pete asks, unable to contain his nosiness any longer. Jed just grunts and adds a bag of peppermint sticks to his purchases. He's not ready to explain the situation to anyone, partly because he doesn't fully understand it himself. As he loads his supplies into the wagon, Jed can feel eyes on him from every direction. Mrs. Henderson peers through her lace curtains. Doc Williams tips his hat but doesn't approach. At the saloon, several men have come out to the porch to stare openly. The whispers start before he's even climbed back onto his wagon seat. Old Mercer's gone soft. Crazy old coot's got kids now? Probably lost his mind along with his family. Let them talk, Jed thinks. He's been the subject of their pity and speculation for months anyway. The ride back to the ranch gives him time to think about what he's gotten himself into. 3 days ago, he was ready to die. Now he's buying diapers and worried about a baby's cough. But when he arrives home and sees Maisie hanging laundry on the line he'd forgotten he owned, and Tate trying to gentle one of the horses with surprising skill, something settles in his chest that he thought was gone forever. Purpose, responsibility, reasons to wake up tomorrow. Maisie approaches as he unloads the wagon, her expression defensive. You ain't told nobody about us, have you? Jed shakes his head. Your business is your business, girl. But folks are curious. It's a small town. Fear flashes across her face. They can't know we're here. If certain people come looking... She doesn't finish the sentence, but she doesn't need to. Jed's seen enough of life to understand that children don't run away from good situations. Whatever they're hiding from is bad enough to risk starvation and exposure rather than stay. He reaches into the wagon and pulls out a small pocket knife. Nothing fancy, just a practical tool with a good sharp blade. He hands it to Maisie, whose eyes widen in surprise. If I meant you harm, Jed says quietly, I wouldn't harm you. Maisie takes the knife with trembling hands, testing the weight of it, the reality of it. It's more than just a weapon. It's trust. It's the first gift she's received in longer than she can remember. Thank you, she whispers. Jed nods and heads toward the house, leaving her to examine her new treasure. Maybe, he thinks, they're all learning how to trust again. A week passes, and routines begin to form. Jed finds himself assigning small chores to Tate, mucking stalls, brushing the horses, feeding chickens. The boy takes to ranch work like he was born to it, his small hands surprisingly capable, and his attention to detail impressive for someone so young. This morning, Jed is teaching Tate how to properly groom the old mare, Belle, when the boy asks the question that's been hanging in the air since they arrived. Did you have a boy once, Mr. Jed? Jed's hands are still on Belle's flank. It's the first time any of them have directly asked about his past, though he's caught them studying the empty picture frames and the child-sized clothes still hanging in the back of his closet. I did, Jed says simply. Tommy, he'd be about your age now. Tate considers this, continuing to brush Belle with careful strokes. Where is he? Gone, Jed says. Him and his mama both. Fire took them last winter. The boy nods solemnly, as if he understands loss in a way no child should. They work in comfortable silence for a while before Tate sets down his brush. Want to show you something, the boy says. They walk together toward the house, past the vegetable garden that Maisie has been trying to resurrect, past the chicken coop where baby Emma sleeps in a makeshift crib Jed fashioned from old crates. Near the side of the house stands a tree that Jed hasn't been able to look at directly since the fire. It's a young oak, or was. Now it's mostly charred bark and blackened branches, a monument to that terrible night when everything burned. The fire department from town arrived too late to save the house, but they managed to save this tree, the one Tommy planted the spring before he died. That was his, Jed says, his voice rougher than usual. Planted it from an acorn he found down by the creek. Said he wanted to grow something that would last forever. Tate stares at the damaged tree for a long moment, then walks over to examine it more closely. To Jed's surprise, the boy reaches out and touches the trunk gently, almost reverently. It's still alive, Tate says. See? New growth down here at the base, It hurts, but it ain't dead. Jed looks where the boy is pointing and sees what he's missed in months of avoiding this spot. Tiny green shoots emerging from the blackened bark near the ground. Life persists despite devastation. That afternoon, while Jed is checking the back fence, he finds Tate kneeling beside the burnt oak with a small sapling in his hands, a young cottonwood he must have dug up from near the creek. The boy is carefully planting it a few feet away from Tommy's tree, his small face serious with concentration. "What are you doing?" Jed asks. Tate looks up, dirt on his cheeks and hope in his eyes. "Figured Tommy's tree might be like some company. And maybe you'd like to watch something grow again." The gesture hits Jed harder than he lets on. For months, he's seen only endings. But there's this boy, this stranger who owes him nothing, planting new life beside old hurt. That night, Jed stands at his kitchen window, looking out at the two trees, one scarred but surviving, one small but full of promise. The trouble arrives on a Tuesday morning in the form of a beat-up pickup truck that rattles down Jed's drive like a snake looking for something to bite. Jed is fixing a broken fence post when he hears the engine approaching, and something about the sound puts him immediately on edge. He's learned to trust his instincts over the years, and right now they're screaming danger. The truck stops near his front porch, dust settling around it like a dirty cloud. The man who gets out is lean as a whip and twice as mean-looking, with the kind of eyes that enjoy other people's pain. Jed approaches slowly, his hand resting casually on the hammer in his belt. "Help you with something?" The stranger looks around the property with calculating eyes, taking inventory of everything valuable. Name's Carson, looking for some kids that might have wandered this way. 2 young ones and a baby. Family's been worried sick. The lie rolls off his tongue so smoothly that Jed might have believed it if he hadn't seen the raw terror in Maisie's eyes whenever she talks about going back. This isn't a worried family. This is the wolf they've been running from. "Haven't seen any kids," Jed says evenly. "You might try Johnson Place, about 10 miles south." Carson's smile is all teeth and no warmth. "Funny thing is, I got reliable information that they came this way. Real reliable." His eyes narrow as he studies Jed's face. "You wouldn't lie to me, would you, old man?" "I'd have no reason to," Jed replies, though his grip on the hammer tightens slightly. From the corner of his eye, Jed can see movement in the house, a curtain twitching in what he knows is Maisie's room. The children are watching, listening, probably scared out of their minds. Carson takes a step closer, his voice dropping to something that's meant to be threatening. "See, those kids belong to me. The girl's old enough to be useful, the boy's got strong hands for work, and the baby, well, babies bring good money from folks who can't have their own." The casual way he talks about selling children makes Jed's blood run cold. This isn't just about family or custody. This is about human trafficking, about treating children like livestock. "I told you," Jed says, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. "No kids here. Time for you to move along." Carson laughs, but there's no humor in it. "Oh, I'll be moving along, but I'll be back, old man. And when I come back, I won't be asking nicely." He climbs back into his truck and starts the engine. But before driving away, he rolls down his window and spits into the dirt. "They're mine," he calls out, "and I always collect what's mine." As the truck disappears down the drive, Jed stands perfectly still, watching the dust settle. That night, he sits on his porch cleaning his shotgun and loading shells with methodical precision. War is coming. That night, the sky opens up and pours rain like it's trying to wash away all the sins of Dry Creek Basin. Thunder rolls across the valley in waves, and lightning illuminates the landscape in brief, violent flashes that make everything look like a battlefield. The children sleep fitfully in the main house while Jed sits on his covered porch, nursing a bottle of whiskey and listening to the storm. But tonight, the whiskey isn't about forgetting, it's about courage for what's coming. Around midnight, when the rain has settled into a steady rhythm, Jed makes his way through the downpour to the small cemetery behind his house. It's just 2 graves, marked with simple wooden crosses he carved himself. Sarah and Tommy, side by side under an old cottonwood tree. Jed kneels in the mud between the graves, rain streaming down his face like tears he can't shed anymore. The whiskey has loosened his tongue, and for the first time since the funeral, He talks to them. I was ready to join you, he says to the wooden crosses. Had it all planned out. Dug the hole and everything. Figured there wasn't anything left worth staying for. Lightning flashes, illuminating the cemetery in stark black and white. Then they came and, he continues, 3 kids running from something worse than death, and I'll be damned if I know why, but they reminded me of something I thought I'd forgotten. He takes a long pull from the bottle, wincing as the whiskey burns his throat. They reminded me that protecting people is what makes a man worth something. Remember how you used to say that, Sarah? How a man's worth isn't measured by what he owns, but by who he's willing to stand up for. The rain intensifies, but Jed doesn't move. That Carson fellow's coming back. I can feel it in my bones the way you used to feel storms coming. And when he does, I'm going to have to do things that might send me straight to hell. But I can't let him take those kids. I can't fail again. A particularly loud crack of thunder seems to shake the very earth, and in that moment, Jed makes his peace with whatever's coming. He spent 6 months wanting to die, but now he's found something worth living for, and more importantly, something worth killing for if necessary. The next morning dawns clear and bright, as if the storm never happened. Jed wakes up on his kitchen floor again, but this time it's different. This time, he has purpose. He spends the morning doing something he should have done months ago. He walks to the hill where he dug his own grave and begins filling it in. Each shovelful of dirt feels like a promise, a commitment to the future instead of surrender to the past. That evening, as they prepare dinner together, Jed realizes the hole in his chest has begun to fill itself with hope. Carson returns on a Friday, just as Jed knew he would, but this time he's not alone. He's brought 2 other men, both armed and both looking like they've done this kind of thing before. They approach the ranch house with the confidence of people who've never been told no and live to regret it. Jed is ready for them. He's positioned himself behind the water trough near the barn with clear sight lines to the house and the main approach. His shotgun is loaded with buckshot, and his old Army Colt is tucked into his belt. More importantly, he's made peace with what he's about to do. The children are hidden in the root cellar beneath the kitchen floor, a hiding place Jed showed them 3 days ago. Carson climbs out of his truck with theatrical confidence, spreading his arms wide like he's greeting an old friend. Jed Mercer, good to see you again. Hope you've had time to reconsider our conversation. Told you before, Jed calls back. No kids here. Time for you to leave. Now see, that's where we have a problem, Carson says, signaling to his companions to spread out. Because I know for a fact they're here, and I'm tired of playing games. The 2 other men begin moving toward the house, their intentions clear. They're not here to negotiate. They're here to take what they want by force. Jed doesn't give them the chance. His first shot drops the man heading for the front door, the buckshot catching him center mass and spinning him around like a child's toy. The sound echoes across the valley like thunder, and suddenly the afternoon explodes into chaos. Carson dives behind his truck while the second man returns fire with a rifle, bullets whining off the metal water trough like angry wasps. Jed keeps low, waiting for his moment, remembering skills he learned 20 years ago in a different war. The gunfight is brief but decisive. Jed's second shot wounds Carson in the shoulder, sending him sprawling in the dirt and screaming curses. The third man, seeing his companions down and realizing he's outmatched, breaks cover and runs for the truck. But he doesn't make it. Tate appears from nowhere, apparently having ignored Jed's instructions to stay hidden, and throws himself at the fleeing man's legs. Both of them go down hard, rolling in the dirt, and in the struggle, the man's knife catches Jed across the ribs as he moves in to help the boy. Tate, get clear! Jed shouts through gritted teeth, and the boy scrambles away just as Jed's final shot ends the threat permanently. When the smoke clears, 2 men are dead and Carson is bleeding in the dirt, his shoulder shattered and his confidence destroyed. Jed approaches carefully, keeping his shotgun trained on the wounded man, despite the blood seeping through his shirt. Should have listened the first time, Jed says quietly. Carson's breathing becomes labored, and Jed can see the light starting to fade from his eyes. Sheriff Williams is a practical man who's been keeping the peace in this part of New Mexico for 15 years. He's seen enough violence to know the difference between murder and justified defense, and as he surveys the scene at Jed's ranch, including Jed's bloodied shirt, in the knife wound Dr. Henley is stitching up, his verdict is clear. 3 armed men, known criminals from the territorial marshal's files, he says, making notes while the doctor works. Clear case of self-defense. You're lucky that knife didn't go deeper, Jed. Few inches to the left and we'd be having a very different conversation. The children emerge from their hiding place like ghosts, wide-eyed and shaken but unharmed. Maisie runs to Jed first, throwing her arms around his neck with fierce gratitude. You kept your promise, she whispers against his shoulder. Always will, girl, Jed replies. Always will. The story comes out in pieces over the next hour. Maisie, no longer afraid of the truth, tells Sheriff Williams about Carson and his network of child traffickers, how he'd bought her and Tate from their drug-addicted mother for $50 and a bottle of laudanum, how he'd forced them to steal and beg for him, keeping them in line with threats against baby Emma. He said if we ever ran, he'd sell the baby to people who'd hurt her, Maisie explains, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. Said he'd make sure we watched before he killed us both. Sheriff Williams takes notes with growing disgust, occasionally glancing at Carson's body with obvious satisfaction. We've been tracking this Carson fellow for months. The Territorial Marshal's Office has warrants for him in 3 counties: child trafficking, assault, murder. You did the territory a service, Jed. Tate, who's been quiet throughout the interview, finally speaks up. Mr. Jed saved us. We'd be dead or worse if he hadn't fought for us. The sheriff looks at Jed with new respect. Heard you'd been having a rough time since the fire. Folks in town figured you'd given up on life entirely. I had, Jed admits. These kids reminded me that giving up is a luxury some people can't afford. As the bodies are loaded into the sheriff's wagon, Maisie approaches Jed with a question that's been haunting her since the shooting stopped. Do we still have to leave? Now that Carson's dead, are there other people who'll come looking for us? Jed considers the question seriously. Carson's operation was likely larger than just him, and there might be others who knew about the children. But more importantly, he realizes that he doesn't want them to leave. There's probably paperwork to be done, he says finally. Legal adoption procedures, that sort of thing. But if you're asking whether I want you to stay, he pauses, looking at each of them in turn. Well, you already unpacked my heart. Might as well stay and help me figure out what to do with it. Maisie's smile could power the whole territory. 6 months later, Dry Creek Basin buzzes with life in ways that would have seemed impossible during those dark winter days when Jed was digging his own grave. The Mercer Ranch has been transformed from a monument to grief into something that looks suspiciously like hope made manifest. Chickens peck and scratch in the yard, filling the air with contented clucking. A vegetable garden flourishes where once only weeds grew, tended by Maisie's careful hands and Tate's surprising knowledge of which plants grow best in New Mexico soil. Baby Emma, now walking and babbling in the way of toddlers everywhere, toddles around the yard like she owns the place. The 2 trees, Tommy's burnt oak and Tate's cottonwood, have both grown in ways that defy expectation. The oak has put out new branches despite its scarred trunk, while the cottonwood has shot up nearly 3 feet, its leaves dancing in the desert breeze like nature's own celebration. Jed sits in his rocking chair on the front porch, baby Emma balanced on his knee, watching Maisie chase Tate through the tall grass behind the house. Their laughter carries on the wind, mixing with the sound of cattle lowing in the distance and the gentle creak of the windmill that Tate helped him repair last month. The adoption papers came through 3 weeks ago, making everything official in the eyes of the law. But in his heart, Jed had claimed these children as his own the moment he decided to fight for them. Maisie Mercer, Tate Mercer, and Emma Mercer, names that look right written in his careful handwriting in the family Bible. Mr. Jed, Tate calls from across the yard, breathless from running. Come see what Maisie found. Jed settles Emma more securely in his arms and follows the boy to what used to be the site of his self-dug grave. Where once there had been a hole in the earth deep enough to bury his sorrows, there's now a flower garden that Maisie designed and planted entirely on her own. Sunflowers tower over the smaller blooms like golden sentinels, their faces turned toward the afternoon sun. Marigolds and zinnias create splashes of orange and red that seem to dance in the breeze. And at the center of it all, a small stone marker that Tate carved with careful attention. For all the people who couldn't stay, the marker reads, but helped us learn how to live. It's a monument to Sarah and Tommy, but also to the children they might have been if Carson had succeeded in his plans. It's a reminder that from the deepest grief can come the most unexpected joy. It's beautiful, Jed says, his voice thick with emotion. Your mama would have loved it. As the sun sets over Dry Creek Basin, the Mercer family heads inside for dinner. The grave he dug for himself has become a garden. The silence that once consumed his house has been replaced with the beautiful chaos of family life. And the future that had seemed so empty now stretches ahead, filled with possibilities he never dared to imagine. If you thought these were crazy, you won't want to miss what happens in this next video.